Well, that's our visit for this week. I've liked being with you this week. Since we're together, we might as well say...
Remember when the most radical thing on television was a cardigan and sneakers? When kindness wasn't considered weakness and feelings actually mattered more than focus group testing? Well, that was Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, the show that turned PBS into America's babysitter while parents in the 70s were busy explaining why Kojak always had lollipops. For over 30 years, Fred Rogers proved that you didn't need explosions or cartoon violence to hold a kid's attention. Just a soft-spoken guy who somehow made being decent seem revolutionary. But behind all that wholesome sweater energy, some seriously weird stuff was happening in the neighborhood, from urban legends that make conspiracy theories look reasonable to gorillas who knew his routine better than Netflix knows yours. Today, we're counting down 15 bizarre facts about the nicest show on television. So, hit that like button, subscribe for more nostalgic deep dives, and hop on the trolley with us. Because apparently even the most wholesome show in TV history couldn't escape getting strange. Number 15, the pool scene that quietly rewrote civil rights history. Most TV shows in 1969 were busy avoiding controversy like it was cancel culture, while America was watching The Ed Sullivan Show and pretending the Brady Bunch represented real family dynamics.
Oh, there's Officer Clemmons. Hi, Officer Clemmons. Come in.
Mr. Rogers, how are you?
Fine, won't you sit down?
Oh, sure, just for a moment.
It's so warm, I was just putting some water on my feet.
Oh, it sure is.
Would you like to join me?
It looks awfully enjoyable, but I don't have a towel or anything.
Oh, you share mine.
Okay.
Sure.
Oh,
Come along,
man.
I'll put some more water in here.
When Fred Rogers invited Francois Clemmons, Officer Clemmons, on the show to cool their feet together in a wading pool, it looked like the most innocent thing on television. Two guys, hot day, a little bit of water. Instagram-worthy content before Instagram existed to ruin everything, and honestly, before anyone had to worry about going viral for all the wrong reasons. Wrong. At the time, public pools across America were still segregated, and the sight of a white man and a black man sharing the same water was basically a middle finger to racist taboos, delivered with the gentleness of a church hymn and the subtlety of a Christopher Nolan plot twist.
Well, that was so enjoyable. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer.
Well, I know how busy you are.
Rogers didn't make speeches or start a podcast about it because revolutionary acts didn't require a content strategy back then. He just handed Clemmons his towel afterward like it was the most natural thing in the world because to him, it was.
I always like it whenever you have time to visit with us. Can I help you here?
Thanks.
They recreated the moment again in 1993, right around the time Beavis and Butthead were teaching kids that fire was cool, because some lessons are worth repeating, unlike most TV reboots which exist solely to squeeze money from nostalgia. Sometimes the most revolutionary act is just being decent to people. Try explaining that to Twitter. Number 14, Batman worked as Fred's stagehand before he got weird. Before he was brooding over Gotham City and making questionable life choices, Michael Keaton was just a Pittsburgh guy trying to break into show business. His first gig was running props on Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, because even future superheroes had to start somewhere and cable access wasn't hiring. That's right, the man who would later convince audiences he could fly while wearing rubber nipples spent 1975 operating the trolley and working as a production assistant. While the rest of America was getting down to Love Will Keep Us Together and wondering if disco would ever die, Keaton was backstage making sure everything ran smoothly. Keaton worked as a trolley operator, production assistant, and even appeared on camera as one of the Flying Zucchini Brothers during a circus episode. This was back when actors actually had to learn skills instead of just hiring stunt doubles and CGI teams. Wild concept, we know. Years later, when promoting documentaries about Rogers, Keaton called him one of the most genuine people he'd ever worked with, which, considering he later worked with Tim Burton, a man who thinks everything looks better in black and white stripes, really says something about Hollywood's authenticity deficit. The Dark Knight got his start in the neighborhood of make-believe. Still a better origin story than whatever the hell happened in Batman vs. Superman, and infinitely more coherent than anything involving Martha. Number 13, his weight was a love letter and a daily reminder. Fred Rogers maintained the same weight for over 30 years, exactly 143 pounds. That wasn't good genetics or obsessive fitness routines. It was the most romantic thing you've ever heard wrapped in deliberate intention. To Rogers, 143 meant I love you. 1 letter, 4 letters, 3 letters. He called it his ideal weight, not for health reasons, but because stepping on a scale became a daily reminder of his life's mission. While the rest of America was obsessing over Jane Fonda workout tapes, fans caught on, and now Pennsylvania celebrates 143 Day every May 23rd because Fred Rogers was so wholesome he turned arithmetic into a holiday. Meanwhile, most of us can't even remember our own birthdays without Facebook reminders. The man found a way to make bathroom scales inspirational. That's either beautiful or the kind of thing that would get you a Netflix documentary about eating disorders today. Number 12, the sneakers were really about sound engineering, not vibes.
We might as well say, would you be mine? Could you be mine? Won't you be my neighbor?
Everyone remembers the ritual. Fred walks in, changes into his cardigan, and swaps his dress shoes for those blue canvas sneakers. It felt like the visual equivalent of switching from work mode to chill mode, like changing your Zoom background, but meaningful, and way before anyone had to pretend their living room was actually a beach in Maui. But here's the truth that nobody talks about. Those sneakers weren't about connecting with kids, they were about sound engineering. The studio floors amplified every squeak of dress shoes, turning Rogers into an accidental tap dancer every time he moved. The sneakers solved the problem, but over time that practical fix became one of TV's most comforting traditions. Kids didn't realize they were watching someone solve a production issue. They saw someone preparing to give them attention. A budget constraint turned into a masterclass in mindfulness. Leave it to Fred Rogers to accidentally turn a sound problem into a ritual that made millions of kids feel safe. Meanwhile, today's content creators can't even remember to mute themselves on Zoom. Number 11. One man, 50 voices, better than most voice actors. The neighborhood of make-believe felt like a bustling community with distinct personalities. King Friday the 13th's royal pomposity, Daniel Striped Tiger's gentle anxiety, Lady Elaine's chaotic energy, each bringing something different to the table. Plot twist that would make M. Night Shyamalan jealous. Rogers voiced nearly all the main characters himself. While other shows were hiring entire voice acting casts and paying union rates, Mr. Rogers was running a one-man repertory theater behind a cardboard castle. Through those puppets, he could address jealousy, fear, and confusion without the heavy-handed messaging that makes Disney Plus content feel like a public service announcement. No corporate focus groups, just one guy switching voices faster than a prank caller in the 80s. Most actors struggled to develop one convincing character. Rogers created an entire universe of main voices and made it look effortless, which is more than we can say for most Marvel movies. Number 10, every sweater was knitted with love. By Mom, obviously. Those iconic cardigans weren't costume department finds or product placements. They were Christmas presents from Rogers' mother Nancy. And I'm talking about every single one of them, because while most kids never actually get that hand-knitted sweater from Mom, Rogers had the one mother who actually delivered on those craft promises. She hand-knitted them as gifts, which means when viewers saw him put on a sweater, they were actually watching a daily act of maternal love. It wasn't just routine, it was the kind of authentic content that would break Instagram today. While other TV hosts in the 70s were busy coordinating with wardrobe departments and chasing fashion trends, Rogers was literally wearing his mom's hug. Nancy Rogers passed away in 1981, and after that, finding replacement sweaters became an actual production crisis. Suddenly, the most wholesome show on television had a wardrobe emergency that no costume designer could solve. Try explaining that problem to network executives who think everything can be fixed with more money. But by then, those cardigans had become so synonymous with Fred Rogers that the Smithsonian now preserves one as a cultural artifact, right next to other American treasures that nobody under 30 recognizes. Most TV wardrobes are about branding and merchandising opportunities. Rogers' wardrobe was about family history. That's either incredibly sweet or the kind of thing that would give modern stylists anxiety attacks. Imagine trying to source authentic maternal love for a wardrobe budget. Number 9, a gorilla knew his routine better than most Netflix algorithms. Before viral animal videos took over the internet and made us all slightly dumber, Fred Rogers had the ultimate cross-species fan encounter with Koko, the famous gorilla who knew American Sign Language, because even primates had better educational programming than most of what cable was offering. In 1998, when everyone was still arguing about whether Titanic deserved all those Oscars and wondering if this whole internet thing would stick around, Rogers visited Koko at a research facility. Something happened that would have broken Twitter if Twitter had existed to be broken. The gorilla immediately recognized him from watching his show on videotape and proceeded to reenact his shoe-changing ritual, proving that even gorillas understood the importance of comfortable footwear. Koko gently removed Roger's shoes, just like she'd seen him do hundreds of times on screen. Then she signed love and gave him a hug that generated more genuine emotion than most reality TV produces in entire seasons. There was no scripted drama, no manufactured conflict, just a 300-pound gorilla who got what the show was really about. A 300-pound gorilla understood the neighborhood better than most network executives, which is either a testament to Roger's universal appeal or a devastating critique of television programming in general, and honestly, considering what was on primetime in 1998, we're leaning toward the latter. Now, before we dive into the next batch of weird Rogers facts, let's take a moment to appreciate that we're halfway through a list about children's television that doesn't involve anyone getting arrested or canceled. If you're enjoying these surprising stories about the most wholesome man in TV history, smash that like button and subscribe. Because unlike most nostalgic content that just makes you sad about how terrible everything is now, we're here to remind you that good stuff actually existed. Now, back to discovering that even the nicest show on television had some seriously strange secrets, like number 8, the urban legend that made perfect sense and was completely wrong. Now, if you grew up in an age before social media turned misinformation into an art form, you definitely heard the whispered cafeteria legend that Mr. Rogers was secretly a Navy SEAL sniper covered in tattoos, hiding a dark military past under all that wholesome sweater energy, because nothing says playground credibility like claiming your favorite TV host could kill you with his bare hands. It was the perfect schoolyard mythology. Take the nicest guy on television and give him the kind of secret badass backstory that would make Marvel executives weep with joy. The story spread because it was so deliciously wrong that it felt right. Kids couldn't accept that someone could just be genuinely nice without some dark twist lurking underneath. The truth was that Rogers never served in the military, ever. He was actually a lifelong pacifist who spent the Vietnam War in seminary school. To be honest, he was probably the only guy who looked at the 1960s and thought, you know what this decade needs? More theological study. The rumor probably started because there was another Fred Rogers who was a Marine sharpshooter, but facts never stopped a good conspiracy theory, as the internet has since proven beyond any reasonable doubt. And honestly, this was way before we had to worry about deepfakes and AI-generated content making everything even more confusing. The idea of the most peaceful man on television living a double life as a trained killer is so beautifully absurd, it sounds like something a focus group would pitch after too much caffeine. Sometimes the best legends reveal how desperately we want our heroes to be more complicated than they actually are. Number 7, live jazz made the neighborhood swing, because Rogers had standards. One of the most overlooked elements of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood was the music. While other kid shows used canned music that sounded like it was composed by AI before AI existed, Rogers insisted on live accompaniment. Johnny Costa, nicknamed the Bach of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, led a jazz trio that improvised transitions and background music for nearly 30 years. Kids were getting a world-class jazz education through osmosis, whether they realized it or not. From 1968 until Costa's death in 1996, that piano-bass-drums trio gave the show musical sophistication that most children's programming still doesn't attempt. Because why invest in quality when you can just license whatever's cheap and trending? Costa didn't just play background music. He set the emotional temperature for every scene, creating moments that would make modern content creators cry into their auto-tune software. Most children's shows treat music like a TikTok trend. Rogers hired a world-class jazz pianist and let him turn daily lessons into concert performances. Number 6. He responded to every single fan letter. Yes, really, all of them. In an era before auto-replies, social media managers, and the kind of digital detachment that lets celebrities ignore millions of fans while posting inspirational quotes about connection, Fred Rogers did something that sounds impossible today. He personally responded to every fan letter he received, all 15 to 30 of them, every single day, because back then, actual human connection wasn't considered a liability. With his assistant Elaine Crozier, Rogers treated each letter like a personal conversation. No form letters, no corporate PR speak, no responses written by unpaid interns. Just handwritten replies tailored to whatever the child had shared. While other celebrities in the 80s were busy hiring publicists to filter their fan mail, Rogers was sitting down with a pen like it was 1955. Kids wrote about divorce, death, disabilities, and simple joys. Rogers responded to all of it with the same care he brought to the show, because somehow he'd missed the memo that fame was supposed to make you disconnected and self-absorbed. Most celebrities today get millions of social media mentions that they'll never see, then wonder why they feel isolated. Rogers turned fan mail into a second full-time job because he believed every child deserved a personal response. The man was either operating on a completely different moral frequency or had never heard of scalability, and honestly, given how that approach worked out for him, maybe we're the ones who got it wrong. Number 5, the protest that started with pie throwing and media literacy. Fred Rogers didn't stumble into children's television like most people stumble into their careers. He charged in like a very polite revolutionary with a very specific target, the kind of violent kids' TV that would make modern content seem sophisticated by comparison, and considering what passes for children's programming on YouTube today, that's saying something. In the 1950s, children's programming was pure chaos. Slapstick, pie fights, pratfalls, and violence played for laughs. While most adults were busy worrying about whether rock and roll would corrupt America's youth, Rogers was genuinely appalled watching grown adults take pies to the face on live television, angry that kids were being fed digital junk food disguised as entertainment. Instead of just complaining on social media like the rest of us, he decided to create something better. Every slow transition, every thoughtful pause, every gentle conversation was deliberate counter-programming against the chaos. It was like anti-TikTok before TikTok needed an anti-TikTok. Rogers looked at pie-throwing clowns and cartoon violence and said, "Not on my watch." Then he spent 30 years proving that kindness could be just as compelling as chaos. The man literally revolutionized children's television out of spite. Gentle ministerial spite. Number 4, he was an ordained minister, with television as his church. Now here's something that surprises people who assume all TV personalities are secretly terrible. Fred Rogers wasn't just playing a nice guy. He was actually an ordained Presbyterian minister whose parish happened to be every child in America, because nothing says think outside the box like turning a television studio into a sanctuary. Rogers was ordained in 1963 with a mission unlike any other minister in history: to use television as his pulpit and children as his congregation. The Presbyterian Church essentially created a job description that had never existed before, which is way more innovative than most startups manage today. While other religious leaders were debating whether television was corrupting society, Rogers was busy proving it could actually save it. That's why the neighborhood always carried moral weight without ever preaching specific doctrine or making kids feel guilty for existing. Rogers considered every episode a form of ministry, teaching patience and honesty through songs and puppets instead of the fire and brimstone approach that gave organized religion its stellar reputation. Most ministers get a church building and complaining parishioners. Rogers got a TV studio and a generation of kids who actually wanted to hear what he had to say. It's either the most beautiful calling in religious history or proof that television was always meant to be a spiritual medium. Number 3, that time he tackled global warfare for preschoolers and made it work. Children's television in the 1980s was not exactly known for tackling geopolitical conflict. Most shows were busy teaching kids that problems could be solved with friendship and maybe some mild property damage, because nothing says conflict resolution like a cartoon anvil to the head. In 1983, Rogers created a multi-episode arc about war, bombs, and conflict, topics that would make modern content creators break into stress sweats about focus group reactions. This aired during the US invasion of Grenada and the Beirut bombings, when cable news was just starting to perfect the art of making everyone constantly terrified. Instead of pretending kids weren't hearing the same scary words adults were obsessing over, Rogers decided to address it head on. Through puppets, he explored themes of peace, fear, and conflict resolution, basically creating the kind of media literacy program that we desperately need today but are too busy arguing about to actually implement. The episodes included discussions about arms races and gentle explanations of why people fight wars. For preschool television, it was revolutionary. For network executives, it was probably terrifying. Imagine trying to explain to sponsors why Mr. Rogers was talking about nuclear weapons between segments about sharing and caring. While other shows were avoiding anything more controversial than sharing toys, Rogers was explaining global warfare to 4-year-olds using hand puppets and piano music. The man had either tremendous courage or questionable judgment, and honestly, these two things often look identical from a distance. Number 2, he couldn't see the colors that made him famous. Perfect irony. Here's a delicious irony that perfectly summarizes Rogers' entire approach. The man famous for his colorful cardigans couldn't actually see all the colors that made him iconic, because even Fred Rogers had to deal with life's little plot twists. Rogers was red-green colorblind, which means that the famous red sweater now sitting in the Smithsonian probably looked brownish to him. His whole visual brand was built on colors he couldn't distinguish, like being a food critic with no sense of taste but somehow more meaningful. While color consultants were probably charging other TV shows thousands to perfect their palettes, Rogers was just wearing whatever mom knitted. The detail wasn't widely known until after his death, when colleagues revealed it in interviews and biographies. For viewers, those bright sweaters were part of his warm, welcoming image. For Rogers, the ritual was about comfort and consistency, not Instagram-worthy aesthetics like we are today. The man who became synonymous with a red cardigan couldn't actually see red properly. That's either cosmic irony or proof that authentic content happens when you focus on meaning instead of metrics. Knowing Mr. Rogers, he'd probably say it was both and somehow make you feel better about your own limitations in the process. Number 1. He created television's most subversive show by complete accident. Now, here's the weirdest fact of all. Fred Rogers set out to make a simple children's show and accidentally created the most quietly radical program in television history. More subversive than anything that's ever tried to be edgy on premium cable, and without a single anti-hero or gratuitous violence scene. Think about it for a second. In an era of Cold War tensions and cultural upheaval, Rogers built a world where feelings mattered more than strength, where differences were celebrated instead of monetized, and where adults admitted when they didn't have all the answers. It was basically the opposite of everything else on television then and now. He addressed divorce, death, war, racism, and disability, topics most adults avoided discussing with children because they're uncomfortable and don't sell merchandise. He did it without preaching, without focus group testing, and without pretending life was always easy or that problems could be solved with the right consumer purchases. The Neighborhood wasn't just entertainment, it was a 30-year demonstration that kindness wasn't weakness, that listening was more important than talking, and that every person had inherent worth regardless of demographics or market value. Concepts that would make modern executives break out in hives. Rogers never set out to be a revolutionary, he just wanted to help children feel safe in a confusing world. But in a culture that treats kindness as naivete and gentleness as weakness, and has only gotten worse at this over time, that simple goal became accidentally subversive. Fred Rogers proved that the most radical art in American television was treating children like human beings instead of consumer demographics. He didn't need explosions, conflict, or manufactured drama. Just a cardigan, some puppets, and the revolutionary idea that everyone deserves to be loved exactly as they are. Try pitching that to Netflix today. And there you have it. 15 weird, wonderful, and accidentally revolutionary facts about a show that proved kindness could be just as compelling as chaos and infinitely more valuable than whatever algorithm-driven content we're being fed today, because nothing says quality program like an AI deciding what you should watch based on your browsing history. Which fact surprised you the most? Are you one of the lucky kids who got a personal letter from Mr. Rogers, or maybe you just needed to hear today that you're loved exactly as you are, even if that feels impossible to believe in our current media landscape? Share your neighborhood memories in the comments section below. We love hearing how these shows shaped who you became, back when television occasionally tried to make people better instead of just more distracted. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for more nostalgic journeys into the shows that actually gave a damn about their audience. And until next time, this is Remember When, and thank you for being my neighbor.